I've come to realize that the psychology of our relationship with food has much more to do with reversing diabetes and obesity than the specific food we eat. I can know all day long that a ketogenic diet with fasting is profoundly healing to me, but that doesn't make me want a pizza or some ice cream any less. During my journey, I was very lucky to have some awakenings that really clued me into how unhealthy my relationship with food had become. And I figured out how to build a better relationship with food. This is my story, and fair warning, this will be much more emotional than when I'm discussing electrolytes or biochemistry or whatever. Always a bit skeptical of the notion of sugar addiction. I mean, I knew sugar could be used as a drug in the sense that if I needed to sleep at a particular time and couldn't, eating a bunch of sugar would result in a crash that would knock me out. But without much of a sweet tooth, I couldn't really imagine being addicted to it. However, I did know my relationship with pizza was unusual. Most people, if they've had a really bad day, want a drink after work. For me, on very bad days, I wanted a pizza delivered. So I knew I used pizza the way other people used alcohol, but everyone who drinks isn't an alcoholic, and though I used carbs like drugs, I didn't think of myself as having a problem. I'd been diabetic for a very long time and spent most of 2 decades eating a keto diet. I say most because I occasionally tried other diets, but none controlled my blood glucose as well as low carb. But the other reason I say mostly is because I was never really strict. Much of the time I was doing keto, I allowed myself a monthly splurge. I discovered that such splurges screwed up my blood glucose for a day or so, and that seemed acceptable to me. I was mostly good, but I was pushing the boundaries, and after doing that for a couple decades, I lost control of my blood glucose entirely. Not wanting to go on insulin, I postponed dealing with extremely high blood glucose that just wouldn't come down, no matter what I did, until I had a heart attack. A visit to the cath lab was unsuccessful, so a bypass was scheduled. And they wanted my blood glucose controlled before the surgery, so I began on insulin. Part of the problem with being on regular insulin injections was that I could control my blood glucose no matter what I ate. I began by doubling my carb allowance, thinking this meant I could eat lots more fruit and vegetables. But once I had experimented enough and was sure of my ratios, the amount of insulin I needed to cover both carbohydrate and protein, I began applying that knowledge to other things like my beloved pizza and pasta and bread and French fries. I could keep my blood glucose firmly under 140 just by adjusting my insulin. I did that for a year, carefully recording my blood glucose, blood pressure, and temps on a chart I'd made in Excel. And at the end of a year, I saw that though my average calorie intake was 1,400 calories a day, I'd gained weight. Although, like looking back, I did not record everything. If I had a cup of coffee with heavy whipping cream, that wasn't going to affect my blood glucose, so I didn't write it down. So I probably was eating significantly more than the average 1,400 calories a day. By this time of my life, the anxiety, shame, and disgust I'd felt for decades due to my obese status was pretty much irrelevant to me. I was living in outright fear. I'd been told recovery from the bypass would take about 3 months and was still often bedridden and had many days when I still needed narcotics for the pain a year afterwards. What I'd been doing was calculating the macros of everything I ate, testing my blood glucose before I ate, calculating the appropriate insulin dosage, then checking my blood glucose 1 and 2 hours after I ate to verify I was on track. Frankly, this was a complete pain in the ass amount of work to do every time I ate, and I joked I spent more time thinking about food than folks with eating disorders did, but without the motivation they had. When I wound up a year into this, fatter, still disabled, and in pain most of the time, I lost all motivation. I became vague about estimating my food intake and haphazard about insulin dosing. It didn't seem worth the work to control blood glucose tightly if I was going to be sick anyway. But I was still interested in getting well. I investigated many things over the years. An online friend of mine got off insulin with high-dose coenzyme Q10. I tried that. A hormone discovered since I'd learned my biochemistry, amylin, was available as a drug, Similin, and there was evidence it helped with both blood glucose control and weight loss. So I spent a small fortune for the privilege of taking 3 extra shots a day. I followed a brilliant physician in the UK, Dr. Sarah Myhill, who studied chronic fatigue and mitochondrial dysfunction, and I tried several of the nutrients she suggested. Chris Masterjohn did a series on the Krebs cycle, and while reviewing my knowledge in hopes of figuring out why my body wasn't handling glucose properly, he pointed out that some diabetics achieve remission with high-dose thiamine. So I tried that for over a month, and while it didn't help, at least it was a cheap thing to try. I tried literally scores of things for over a decade that made no difference, to add to my year-long experiment with tight blood glucose control. I realize I'm not talking about carb addiction quite yet, but stay with me for a bit. I'll get to it. 2 things I tried did help. Treating with a physiological dose of steroids reversed my adrenal insufficiency, thus reducing my fatigue enough that I could get out of bed daily and often had enough spoons to be able to accomplish more than a shower on a daily basis. And also treating my reverse T3 issues with T3 only meds gave me energy beyond what I'd had since before the heart attack, though not enough to fix my disability for even a part-time job. And I kept deteriorating overall, losing more and more abilities. I had numerous small issues, painful boils, non-healing wounds, Charlie horses due to low potassium, and I had larger issues like edema as my legs began to swell often, particularly bad when I took a shot of fast-acting insulin. I made the mistake of trying a couple different meds called SGLT2 inhibitors and wound up very ill in an ER with a doctor explaining to me that I had diabetic ketoacidosis. When I explained to him that I couldn't have DKA because I was a type 2 diabetic, he said they'd been seeing a lot of this with this entire class of drugs. I spent several days in an ICU with 8 bags of electrolytes dripping into 2 IVs before making it back to the main floor. The endo treating me had me back on bolus insulin to control my blood glucose since I had DKA, and my legs swelled up badly and my cellulitis became badly infected. So the infectious disease specialist was called in to treat me with heavy-duty IV antibiotics. I knew that endo wouldn't release me without my blood glucose being controlled, so I was going to keep ordering insulin. My legs were never going to heal while so swollen from insulin, so I was pretty much trapped. I was going to die here in this hospital. So I went home to die. They made me sign a bunch of papers saying I knew I was pretty much going to die. I felt it was inevitable, and I was going to do it where I didn't need a doctor's permission to shower where I could eat after 6 p.m., and where I had kitties to love on. Spoiler alert, I didn't die. But a year later, I woke up in an out-of-state hospital, missing 6 weeks of memory, unable to move. In the following weeks, I was in and out of delusions. My memories include both things I'm pretty sure actually happened, and as well as obvious hallucinations. And I discovered I'd had multiple surgeries removing a large chunk of my right leg due to necrotizing fasciitis and had nearly died. Having removed most of the lymph nodes in that leg, the circulation was poor, and 3 of my toes went black, requiring 3 stents to be put in that leg, which saved 2.5 of the toes. During that same hospitalization, I had a pulmonary embolism and nearly died a second time. There was a lot of rehab involved, first in a facility, then at home, and eventually outpatient, to learn to stand and walk again. And I couldn't manage tall curbs or steep stairs without help. I eventually got to where I could walk without help on perfectly flat surfaces, but needed a cane or walking stick to manage non-concrete. Have I mentioned I lived on a farm? To go anywhere, my home health aide had to drive the car on the lawn right up to the porch, so I only had to walk a few steps. After my recovery, my life consisted of walking from my bed to my desk, occasionally to the john, but I often used a portable commode next to my bed when I was particularly weak. Doctor appointments and sometimes grocery shopping, though other times I just sent someone with a list. I could plan meals and thus plan shopping, but I couldn't stand long enough to cook or do dishes. I was existing, not living. I thought the surgeries had not been worth it. My life was pretty much over at that point, and the whole thing rather pissed me off, as I'd have never consented to removing so much of my leg had I been competent to decide. I had resigned myself to dying a year earlier. That was okay. What was not okay was living as a double amputee in a wheelchair, and I'd come close to being halfway there. A while after this, I suddenly got a job offer that I could actually do. Amanda, an online friend, asked me to manage her Facebook page, basically like people's comments and reply now and then. She asked for an hour a day, and even on days when I couldn't quite manage that, I was able to make up for it on other days. She was busy with other things and just wanted to keep her audience engaged while she was. So it was a perfect situation for me in that I could feel useful in the world for the first time in over a decade. Unfortunately, I awoke one day unable to breathe, wound up in the ER where they diagnosed COPD. Later, pulmonary function tests ruled that out, but also congestive heart failure, which is what it was. A whole heck of a lot of IV diuretics while hospitalized cleared enough fluid from my lungs, but I actually had to sleep upright in a chair for some time after discharge. A while after this, Amanda told me why she'd been too busy to handle her Facebook page. She had planned to have bariatric surgery, but had stumbled on a weight loss method that resulted in her losing 100 pounds in 8 months. She excitedly told me how she'd combined keto and fasting to accomplish this. I was not impressed. I was so far past wanting to lose weight. I wanted to be able to lie down and breathe simultaneously. And I argued with her. Keto did not ever cause me to lose more than a few pounds. It would not work for diabetics. It had controlled my blood glucose until it didn't anymore. I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew that wasn't it. I didn't really argue with her much about the fasting business. I just kind of judged her silently. She had done a number of extended fasts as well as mostly eating with a one meal a day model. I suspected she had developed an eating disorder and thought this fasting business was totally crazy. And she began posting about it on her Facebook page and people got interested. I never officially quit working for her, but I'm sure she noticed I wasn't doing it anymore. And then she started the Eat Like a Bear group on Facebook. I'd known her online for years and knew she knew a great deal about food nutrition from her previous blogs and many videos, but suspected that in that group, people wouldn't get it and would wind up malnourished trying to do this fasting stuff. Today, it amuses me that I, who had eaten myself into over 30 years of diabetes with weight ranging up to 300 pounds at times, thought she had an eating disorder, but never considered that my relationship with pizza was pretty damn dysfunctional. A year later, I had another bout of congestive heart failure, but just stayed home, slept in my chair, and took a heck of a lot of my prescribed diuretic Lasix. This time my disability worsened further. I could barely stay awake 2 to 3 hours at a time. So sometimes missed my home health aide's presence. And if she kept cooked for me and left the food on the bottom shelf of my fridge, I literally couldn't reach it to microwave it later. I'd been expecting to die for several years now, but my body wasn't cooperating. I kept waking every day, disappointed that I was still alive. I now faced an even worse scenario. I might need more help than home health aides could provide. There might be a nursing home in the near future. I made arrangements to assure I'd die rather than that. But after a month or so, the congestive heart failure got better and I was awake more. And one day, YouTube running on autoplay showed me a video from Dr. Jason Fung. Back then, Dr. Fung wasn't running a channel for laymen like he is today. His videos were from conferences, talks he gave to other healthcare professionals and scientists. The research he presented started to convince me, and I began to see a glimmer of hope that I could reverse my diabetes with this fasting thing. Diabetes was the first thing that went wrong with me. If I could fix that, maybe everything else would get better. Spoiler alert, it did. Oh my God, it so did. It didn't escape my notice that what he was describing sounded suspiciously similar to what Amanda had done. Maybe she hadn't gone off the deep end. I ate mostly keto for a month while devouring everything I could find that Dr. Fung had been involved in, and many of Amanda's videos also. And I decided that August 1st, 2019 would be my start date. My mindset hadn't changed at all. In my desperation, I expected carbs would be part of my life again someday. I would just do this fasting stuff for a while to fix my elevated insulin, which I now understood was the root of my problem, and then cheat now and then like I had before. Having not eaten carbs for a month, the day I planned to start, I panicked briefly. I decided to give myself one more day and had myself a carb fast, ensuring that I was not in ketosis when I began my first fast. In fact, just before midnight, to get it in under the wire, I ate a meal consisting of Polish sausage and an entire package of flavored Knorr noodles. So I began my first extended fast on August 2nd, not in ketosis and certainly not fat adapted, and not really even thinking about weight loss, just watching my blood glucose. And a funny thing happened. As my insulin dropped, the edema in my legs began to resolve. In just a couple days, I could feel below my knees for the first time since the surgeries that had removed much of my leg. Every day I could feel further and further down my legs until I could feel every one of my 9.5 remaining toes. Just 7 days in, I decided to try to walk without my walking stick, and I could. Being able to feel the ground made a huge difference. I hadn't had true neuropathy after all. And I realized that it was carbohydrates that had robbed me of my ability to walk. And when I thought of my near-death experiences with the heart attack, diabetic ketoacidosis, necrotizing fasciitis, pulmonary embolism, and 2 bad bouts of congestive heart failure, this led me to a shocking light bulb moment. Carbs had nearly killed me. I was in the Like a Bear group by now and posted about my epiphany. Meanwhile, Amanda had asked me to review her digital Ridiculously Big Salad book as she was working on the 2nd edition. I was relieved to see she was teaching an extremely nutrient-dense way of eating. The ridiculous referred to the portions of vegetables in her salads, which were topped with a decent dose of protein and dressed with healthy fats to make the whole thing yummy. Both carb and calories conscious, in my absence, the RBS had emerged as the most successful type of meal for weight loss in the group. No one who followed her was going to wind up malnourished, and this was a heck of a lot easier than planning my own meals. And around this time that I posted that I had realized that carbs had nearly killed me repeatedly, the utterly lovely Anna Sul posted something that totally blew my mind. You may have loved carbs, but they didn't love you back. Putting it in relationship terms like that really made me think. A member of my family had been in a severely abusive relationship literally for decades until his partner finally died. And a friend of my daughter's had been in one that caused much drama not only in her life, but of mine and Steve's and my daughter's and their other mutual friends. And I never understood why anyone would subject themselves to such a thing. Sure, I get that you were deep in the relationship before the abuse began, but that you truly love this person, but there's billions of non-abusive people in the world you could love. Without ever actually saying so out loud, I judged people who stayed or kept going back as behaving rather stupidly. Anna's comment made me realize that I was in a dysfunctional relationship with food, that I had gone back myself again and again to the very thing that had nearly killed me repeatedly and cost me many years of disability and pain. I'd been stupider than anyone I'd ever known in an abusive relationship. Carbs had tried to kill me. My relationship with carby foods today, after 2 years without bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, crackers, or even my formerly beloved pizza, is very similar to that of a recovering alcoholic. I don't touch them at all, ever. I don't think carbs are bad and evil. I don't judge anyone else who eats differently than I do. Some of those folks may have much higher carb tolerance than I do. Everyone doesn't have the same relationship with carbs that I do, and frankly, I don't really care what anyone else eats. I care deeply what I eat, and carbs are just not on my menu. But please, don't feel sorry for me that I can't eat carbs. I can eat any damn thing I want to. I sometimes prepare fast meals, but sometimes cook extravagant gourmet meals as well. I thoroughly enjoy my food, which is tasty as well as nourishing. I'm not missing anything. I don't want to eat that stuff anymore. I have permanently broken up with carbs. I've heard it both quoted and seen it memed many times that addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. That sums it up for me. I've given up carbs, and in return, I've gotten my whole life back. And I can walk. The video in the end card was made from photos taken at Colonel Denning, a local state park where I often hike. I hope it moves you as much as it does me, as it still brings tears of profound gratitude to my eyes to remember how much I have gained in this journey. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Dr. Fung, and thank you, Anna Sul, and all the other bears who've supported me on this journey. Hey, we've got a contest here. Here's a question for you. What hormone are we trying to reduce by doing keto and fasting? Put your answers in a comment below, and I'll randomly choose from the correct answers and follow up with you to win the journal of your choice.